In 1863, a couple of lads got together in a bar and agreed on the rules of a brand new sport. In no time, this sport spread around the globe, and as more people began to practice it and form teams, they also created associations and represented national teams. As matches between countries became more competitive, it was clear that a global tournament was needed to find out which country had the best football in the world. And just like that, a phenomenon, an obsession, was born. Association football arrived in Argentina almost immediately after its inception. In fact, the first recorded football match in Argentina dates back to 1867, only 4 years after the rules of the game were written in England. An association was founded in 1893 and it later joined FIFA in 1912, so it wasn't a surprise that Argentina took part in the first ever FIFA World Cup in 1930. And not only did we compete, we were one of the protagonists. Because you see, the Rio de la Plata, this region around here, was home to the best football in the world in the 1920s. Uruguay won gold at the 1924 and 1928 Olympics, playing the final of the latter against Argentina in Amsterdam, and the two held a fierce and competitive rivalry in the region. And it was thanks to these sporting results that in 1929, Uruguay were granted the right to host the very first FIFA World Cup, with a gigantic stadium being built for the occasion. This was the only edition of the World Cup that didn't have a qualifying phase. Instead, all FIFA members were invited until the 16-team quota was filled. All the American squads joined, but Europeans for the most part declined due to the long trip and the economic depression, even after Uruguay offered to cover the costs. In the end, and due to pressure from FIFA President Jules Rimet, only France, Romania, Yugoslavia and Belgium turned up to Uruguay. Japan and Siam rejected the invitation to represent Asia, while Egypt missed their boat to South America and the chance to represent Africa. In total, only 13 teams took part in the first ever World Cup, divided in 3 groups of 3 and a group of 4, with only the group winners advancing to the semi-finals. Argentina were seeded into Group 1, the only group of 4 alongside Mexico, France and Chile. And if you thought this tournament was a mess, that was only the tip of the iceberg. Remember that big stadium Uruguay promised? It's not done yet! So matches begin in other grounds around Montevideo until the Estadio Centenario was opened 5 days into the tournament. There was no official bowl, both Uruguay and Argentina brought their own football. They were fairly similar, with the Argentine ball being a bit smaller. Team captains would choose before the game which ball they wanted to play with. And in all games that didn't involve Uruguay, the Argentine ball was chosen. Argentina made their World Cup debut on July 15th in the Estadio Parque Central against France. Yes, this story will start and end with France. The French had beaten Mexico 4-1 2 days prior and suffered the injury of their main star, Lucien Laurent, but were still keeping the Argentines at bay. That was until the 81st minute, when Argentina got a free kick on the edge of the box. Luis Monti placed the ball down and looked at the goal, a goal that locals said was haunted. The legend said that whenever a train that passed behind that goal blew its whistle, a goal was scored within seconds. Sure enough, as Monti took a few steps back, the train passed and blew its whistle. When Monti kicked the ball, it pierced through a hole in the French wall and slammed into the top right corner. 1-0 to Argentina with only 8 minutes to go. Or maybe a little less than that. Because as France were looking for an equalizer, Brazilian referee Gilberto de Almeida blew his whistle 5 minutes before the end of regulation. After the entire French team protested, Gilberto took back his mistake and resumed the game, but by then, all French momentum was gone and Argentina was able to hold on to get the win. In the second game, however, the Albiceleste left no doubt. A 6-3 demolition of Mexico with 3 goals by Guillermo Stabile. For the longest time, this was believed to be the first World Cup hat-trick, until records showed that Bert Paternotte had scored 3 for the US against Paraguay 2 days prior. With both teams on 2 wins, the ticket to the semi-finals was decided on the third match against neighbors Chile. There, 2 goals by Stabile led Argentina to a 3-1 victory. The semi-finals of this tournament were the perfect example of South American dominance. Both Uruguay and Argentina won 6-1 over Yugoslavia and the United States respectively, setting up the dream final between the 2 best teams in the world. Around 68,000 spectators filled the Estadio Centenario that afternoon. Argentina was given 8,000 seats, but it is estimated that around 20,000 made the trip over the River Plate to watch this historic moment. In a time where television didn't exist and radios were a luxury, most people gathered in the streets outside the headquarters of local newspapers, who commentated the game as it happened over speakers, and inside convenience stores where clerks tuned their radios on sale to the match. Before the start of the game, there was already a problem. Remember that both Uruguay and Argentina brought their own football to the tournament? Well, now both teams wanted to play using their own ball. Belgian referee John Langenus decided that the Argentine ball would be used for the first half and the Uruguayan ball for the second. The game started very poorly for Argentina. During their group stage game against Chile, striker Francisco Barajo received a nasty foul from a Chilean player. Argentina traveled to Uruguay with no medical staff, and local experts advised Barajo to sit the rest of the tournament out. After not playing against the US, Barajo expressed that he was not fit to play the final either, but the AFA executives sent him onto the field anyway, and after a few minutes he was already seen limping around the pitch at a time where substitutions were not a thing. Argentina was basically playing with 10 men. To make matters worse, 12 minutes in, Héctor Castro assists Pablo Dorado, who puts Uruguay in front. The Estadio Centenario erupts, but Argentina doesn't give up. 8 minutes later, Captain Manuel Ferreira passes it to Carlos Peuchele, who equalizes. And in the 37th minute, Monti lifts the ball over the Uruguayan back line to Stabile to give Argentina the lead, scoring his 8th goal of the tournament, which would be enough to be the top scorer of the first ever World Cup. Like that, Argentina was leading at the break away from home, and tensions were rising. You see, both teams knew that they were the best teams. They had played against each other dozens of times and were bitter rivals. The Uruguayans knew that Argentina was the biggest threat, and so they perpetrated a terror campaign. At every game, at every training session outside their hotel during the night, Uruguayan fans made life impossible for the Argentine squad. A few days before the final, Luis Monti received death threats to himself and his mother, but curiously, this seemed to not have come from Uruguayan fans, but instead from Italian spies, who were trying to make Monti play so bad in the final that the Argentine media would pin the blame of an eventual defeat on him, encouraging him to leave the country, sign for Juventus, and eventually defect to the Nacional. Different sources claim that the Argentine players were threatened in their dressing room by armed Uruguayan fans, and this seemed to be a bit too much to bear for the players. In the second half, the Argentine spirit was gone, especially Monti, who was seen walking around the pitch like a ghost. 57 minutes. A low cross from Héctor Scarone is tapped in by José Pedro Sea. 68 minutes. Victoriano Santos Iriarte scores assisted by Ernesto Mascheroni. 89 minutes. Héctor Castro heads in a cross by Pablo Dorado. 4-2, and Uruguay were crowned as the first ever World Cup champions. After the game, the Buenos Aires police opened fire on a mob that tried to storm the Uruguayan embassy, an incident that harmed the relations between the two countries for years. Barajo said years later, "The Uruguayans beat us by being more brave and gallant, not by being better players." And what happened to Monti? Sure enough, after his return to Buenos Aires, the media went after him for his second-time performance. Feeling rejected by his countrymen, it didn't take much convincing from an Italian agent for him to cross the Atlantic and sign for Juventus. 4 years later, Monti was playing another World Cup final, this time representing Italy. But that is a story for another video.